And there is a term that I want you to be familiar with, and it's called, two terms. One of them is glycogenesis. All right, and as the name sort of implies, the first part of it, glyco, refers to the glycogen, and genesis is to generate. So when we take in excess carbohydrate, along with storing some of it as fat, the liver can take on this process of glycogenesis, and that is the synthesis of glycogen from, we'll say, monosaccharides, so that it can be stored for later use. All right. Now there's another term that's fairly similar to it, and it's called gluconeogenesis. Okay, gluco again, referring to the glycogen. Neo, the prefix neo means new, and genesis means to generate. So what this is the synthesis of, we'll say, glucose from hence the term new, carbohydrate sources. And, for example, fats or lipids and proteins. If you'll recall, which was a long time ago, but carbohydrates have the elements carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. All right, the sugars. The lipids have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Proteins have carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and oftentimes sulfur. But so this process of gluconeogenesis is the generation of glucose from a non-carbohydrate source, that is from either lipids or from proteins, which you can see where that can be possible because the elements are just about the same. All right, anything else I want to say about the liver real quick? Just look at the composition of bile, the bile salts, the bile pigments. There is a term that I want you to be familiar with called jaundice. You ever heard of it?
Yes, I have. It's yellowing, babies being yellow.
Well, not just babies, but anybody, babies, yes, but people that suffer liver damage. For instance, chronic alcoholics. Because among other things, the bile, it contains bilirubin, which is a byproduct of the breakdown of hemoglobin. And this bilirubin is further broken down, but when you have liver damage, or if there's too much of it, like that occurs in babies, it gets deposited under the skin, and you can notice it in the sclera of the eyes, and they'll become a yellowish color. All right, so just know that jaundice is an accumulation of this bilirubin in the tissue and gives you this yellowish appearance. Or anything else I want to say about that? No. All right, regulation of bile release, bile salts. All right, real quick, we'll just go through the divisions of the small intestine. And the last part of this chapter will just identify what we were talking about, the end products of fat, carbohydrate, and protein digestion, what they're made of. So let's just break the small intestine down real quick, because I gotta go in a little bit. So we've left the stomach. We're moving into the small intestine. Small intestine are in the business, you'll hear it referred to as the small bowel. Okay, it's in 3 divisions. First division, right outside the pyloric sphincter, is the duodenum. An important sort of note, take-home message there is most digestion and absorption takes place here. All right, then you have the, oh my gosh, I cannot forget that. It's duodenum. Where? The jejunum and the ileum. Okay. Yeah. Whew. Jejunum. And then third division is the ileum. Not to be confused with the ileum in your hip. And I'll tell you a way to remember that. The ileum in your digestive tract or in the alimentary canal is spelled with an E, and there is a term that refers to the alimentary canal, and that is enteric. And that way to remember that is, you may have heard of a condition called gastroenteritis. Okay, and sort of a general inflammation and not doing too well of the stomach and the intestines. Enteritis, inflammation of the enteric organs, that being, the small intestine and or the large intestine. So anyway, the ileum from the digestive tract is spelled with an E. The ileum from your skeletal system is spelled with an I. All right, like this is your ileum here, your iliac crest and so forth. All right, ileum, duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, and again, most digestion takes place in the duodenum. Now the ileum will connect. You have this valve called the ileocecal valve. And this is what controls the entry of material. At this point, mostly undigested material, that which we have not digested and absorbed in the small intestine, through the ileocecal valve into the large intestine. And if you look, there is a structure right there just below the ileocecal valve. Let's see, that would be figure 15.27 on page 435. And that structure is called the appendix. You may have heard of it. It's what they call a vestigial organ. In other words, it's there, but they're not sure at this point in evolutionary history what it does, if anything. It's just a potential source of infection. All right. There's hypotheses that it may have had some lymphatic function in earlier humans or even in pre-humans, but today it's not assigned any particular function. All right, in the large intestine, right past the ileocecal valve, the first division of the large intestine is the cecum, hence the name ileocecal valve, all right? Okay, then you have the ascending colon. All right, now if you looked at me, the ascending colon is on my right side. So the ascending colon, then the transverse colon, and then the left side, the descending colon, and then you have the sigmoid colon, so-called because of its shape. You may have heard of a procedure called a sigmoidoscopy. That if you haven't had one done, you should, or a complete colonoscopy recommended after the age of 50. I should have another one done. I had one done 10 years ago. All right, so after the sigmoid colon, we have the rectum and then the anus. All right, and when they do that colonoscopy, a full colonoscopy, oftentimes they'll go all the way up across the transverse colon and into sections of the ascending colon, depending upon how long the tube is. And what they're looking for is just abnormalities, polyps, abnormal growths. If you can get to those early, then they can be treated early. A buddy of mine down at the dock, he had lung cancer, but it has metastasized into his colon. He's fighting like hell, but he's fighting a losing battle. All right. You can see, make note of table 15.6, intestinal absorption of nutrients, the monosaccharides, amino acids, fatty acids. Now the primary function, whereas in the small intestine, particularly the first division, primary function is most absorption and digestion. The large intestine, primary function of the divisions of the large intestine is to absorb water, to conserve water. Okay? Not so much that the fecal material becomes hardened and stuck, but enough to maintain homeostasis. And you know that diarrhea, a condition caused by some sort of irritants that has entered into the colon, be it some sort of parasite, some sort of protist in the water. There's a very common one out here in the mountains in the western part of Virginia called Giardia. Don't drink the water that's flowing down the streams. It may look clean, but it has these parasites in them, and then they get into your colon and produce substances that irritate the colon, so that the undigested material passes through way too quickly. And because the muscles are irritated, the smooth muscle is irritated and the muscles contract, not enough time to absorb the water, so that's why you get all of those watery stool. Okay? Dysentery, same kind of thing when you go to foreign countries, because their water, oftentimes, depending upon the country, but a lot of times the water is not cleaned, and to the extent that water is in the United States, and our bodies are not used to it. So you go down to Mexico and drink the water and you end up with dysentery. And dysentery can kill, because among other things, when you have intractable diarrhea, you lose a lot of potassium. And when you do that, you upset the...
So what, a cardiac arrest?
Yes. So not recommended. So the take-home message there: if you go to Mexico, drink the beer, not the water. All right, I gotta see if there's anything else I gotta. No, not really. We went through that. When you look at, starting on section 15.11, the nutrients, we've sort of been over it real quickly. Just kind of go over it. You pretty much know what's going on. Differentiate between the essential amino acids and the amino acids that are non-essential that our body can make. And note that there are, and I'll say this and then we'll wrap. As far as amino acids, there are 20 amino acids that occur in nature, okay? All the proteins of every living thing out there is made up of different arrangements of these 20 different amino acids. And if you're really enthusiastic, which in your first semester of biochemistry, you have to learn what each of those R groups looks like and be able to draw it. And it's not as difficult as you might think. All right. I gotta run, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell.